Run Wild, and this is Business Without Barriers, the show proving we can overcome barriers and create an enriching future when we bring humanity back to business. Our guest today is Hanna Prinsloo. After completing an honors degree in French literature, Hanna lived and worked in France as an au pair for almost a year. She returned to pursue her dream of studying fashion and worked as a designer in couture and ready-to-wear fashion for several years in Johannesburg and Cape Town. Here she won several awards and was featured in all major South African publications. Making a break with fashion, she joined a recruitment agency, and this is where an unexpected but rewarding career in recruitment started. She cut her teeth in IT recruitment, then moved on to senior and executive level finance roles, and in January 2010, she founded StratSource, a recruitment company for mining and related sectors specializing in senior and executive level placements across all disciplines in the industry. Hanna is also the founder of Mining's Most Wanted, an exclusive LinkedIn group created for senior industry leaders. She's developed a career coaching and outplacement services program called UP to assist senior and executive career seekers with the preparation of getting back into the job market. And her YouTube channel, Headhunt with Hanna, is a resource for managers and career seekers to learn about all things recruitment. Hanna loves traveling and enjoys interior design, and every now and again, she gets involved in a major interior project. Today, she's going to share with us what it takes to be a most wanted resource. And given how the world of business has been upended, knowing what it takes to stand out from the crowd has never been more crucial. A very warm welcome to you today, Hanna. So lovely to have you on the show.
Thank you, Carmen. It's a privilege to be on the show.
Awesome. Well, I want to start right at the beginning. Well, maybe not quite right at the beginning, but tell us what it was like to be a couture designer.
Oh my goodness, that's so long ago. You know, I've been a headhunter for almost 20 years, so you kind of need to rack your brain. I guess on the one hand, you know, it was a lifelong dream for me. Growing up, I always wanted to be in a creative field. And I mean, from when I was a little girl, you know, I kind of cut square pieces of fabric and made clothes, you know, and so it really was just something that I probably needed to pursue somewhere in my life. So it was good to work in it. But, you know, when I was doing that, I was actually not street smart at all. And I had no toughness around me. So I wasn't really up to it for the industry. And what I found really in my days, and that is that because the creative process is so very close to one's heart, it was almost too close for me to handle it, you know, so I couldn't handle all the drama around it. And if there was criticism, you know, they hated me, they didn't hate my clothes, you know. So it was actually, you know, some growing up was needed over time, but it was a good experience. I think in the years going forward, you know, and having been doing what I've been doing now for so long, I enjoy the people side so much. And so it's lovely to have these creative outlets with, you know, the interior projects and things that I do on the sideline, but actually not to be working in it, I find works better for me. So now I enjoy both sides very much, you know.
Fantastic. So as most things that on the outside looks really glamorous,
yeah.
It's not always. So what people see on the outside, what's happening behind the scenes is not that. Tell us a little bit about, you had this dream, you had this idea in your mind as to what it was going to be. What was it like at the behind the scenes? What does it take to actually put something of that nature together?
Oh my goodness, Carmen, hours and hours and hours of very, very hard work, you know, because it is such you're making something, you know, so every part of the process takes a lot of physical effort, you know, whether you are making patterns, whether you are putting it together. So that creative side where you are designing and coming up with the ideas is a very small portion. And that's the truth for any creative industry, you know, there's a very small part of it where you actually are just giving out to the creative ideas. And creativity really, in my mind, you get creativity in something that people would not say is creative at all. You know, you can get creativity in accounting because it's the way that you combine the ideas and you put the things together to get an unusual outcome or something that really just works, you know. And that's the truth in anything. But then behind the scenes, you've maybe got 3% or 5% of that wow thinking, and the rest of it gets down to doing the work, putting in place what needs to be done, cutting patterns, making clothes, you know, overseeing a workshop, or, you know, doing your sums, doing your Excel spreadsheets, you know, so whatever it takes to do that. And it's a lot of very, very hard work. The glamour side is a small part of it. So yeah, that's just how I found it.
What would you say? So with every experience, we take something away from it. What did that teach you in terms of being a success in any business? What did you walk away with from that experience?
Sure, that's a difficult question. You know, the way that I'm wired, I kind of always shoot for being the best at what I do, you know, and strive for excellence, really. So not so much being the best necessarily just in comparison, but doing an excellent job of what you are doing. And I think, you know, it was just part of that functioning the same, that whatever you put together and what you did, it's important that it was at a level of excellence. And I guess one of the things that I didn't understand in the beginning, but I grew into understanding it and being able to work with it more, is that even in something like that, you know, when you are doing couture design, the way that people are going to be looking in that evening dress, that wedding dress, that whatever they're going to wear at that function, it gets so close to how they feel about themselves, you know, that in a way you really are able to help people through a whole lot of insecurities and make them feel wonderful, you know, for that moment when they're in the spotlight, you know. And so I guess in that same way, that people part where you can really come alongside people, there was a part of that was probably the biggest walk away with from there, you know.
Sure, and that holds with any role you play. If you
absolutely
get in tune with who they are and help them shine and help them
yes.
be a bit more glamorous
Yeah.
world and release some of those insecurities, wow, you've got a winning formula. Thanks for
Absolutely.
that. You want to add to that?
Well, you know, I'm just thinking what you're commenting on there. It's very much now with what I've started doing, you know, in these last months in developing, I call it career coaching, outplacement services at the moment, but really what it is, it's a way, because there is, especially in the South African job market, but I mean, it's in the States and everywhere, where there's been so many job losses, you know, and you find that when I started doing it, it was almost, you know, I looked at people that were very junior that were reaching out to me that's not really in the market that I can place them, but I kind of almost get desperate on their behalf because I see the mistakes that they're making, and I'm thinking, sure, you're going to battle to get something new if you keep on approaching it this way. And then when I actually started working with it and releasing a lot of the videos, which I'm doing regularly on LinkedIn, just to give people information on how to approach it better, I was very surprised to find at what level of seniority this resonates with people, and actually much more resonates with very senior people, because now you've got people who have been really functioning at the top of their game in a certain organization, generally for a long time. And now all of a sudden, all the security has been pulled out underneath them, and they need to go back into the job market, or potentially go back into the job market, and they don't know how to do this anymore. And they don't know how to think about this anymore, you know. And so it's again, that same thing where you are just from a technical perspective, because I mean, as you know, with what I do, I come in from the technical side, from a recruitment perspective. So yes, of course, you do deal with people's mindset and where they come from, but I'm not a life coach. This is focused on the recruitment space and the headhunting space. And where you can help people just, how do I go back to market? How do I position myself? How do I need to think about this thing? And just give them tools. And it's amazing, because when I started with it, I felt although it's what I do every day, you almost feel incompetent. You think there are people who know so much more, who are so much better qualified to do this. And somewhere along the line, I heard someone say, if you just know 10% more than anyone else on anything, you can already help them because there's something you can teach them. And so that kind of gives you a little bit more confidence to say, okay, at least I know that little bit more and I can help, and then it becomes so rewarding when people come back and they say, oh, wow, I never thought of it this way. I never saw it from that perspective. Thank you. You're helping me here. And that's very rewarding.
So seeing that you've jumped right into, that's where your is why you kind of, what are we doing talking about this stuff 20 years ago? I want to talk about
about now.
So let's go right there. You were speaking about, so right now where we find ourselves in the world, and the economic conditions and the job market, it's so messy, it's tough.
Yeah.
People are in really difficult situations. They're finding themselves in transitions where they never ever thought they may need to be. Yeah. So let's talk about I want to come back to another transition later, but let's talk about the job market for now. You mentioning that even on those executive levels, and maybe particularly there because it may have been a very long time since they were last in the job market.
Yeah.
Give us a little bit of your, advice for anyone that's right now find themselves in the job market. What are some of the mistakes that people tend to make in their profiles, in their CVs, in the way they're approaching it? Can you tell us two things, the mistakes they're making and then how they can rectify this?
Yeah. So, I mean, just looking from a profile perspective. So, obviously nowadays with social media, really your LinkedIn profile is probably as important and in some cases almost marginally more important than what a CV or a resume would be, because people go there and they go and look at what you look like, who you are, they try and get context of you. So the two big mistakes that people make, and they do the same thing on LinkedIn as well as what they do on CVs or resumes, is that they put either almost no information, so this kind of sketchy information with, maybe a company name, it's not even updated, maybe a date on there and a little bit like that. It cannot work for them because of the way that LinkedIn is put together. And on the algorithm, if people are, for example, searching for certain skills or things, you need to have your keywords in there and there needs to be context. And it's on every level. If you are an executive in an organization, your brand that you are presenting is also presenting that organization. So even if you are not in transition or looking for something, if you are the CEO and you have a very bad LinkedIn profile, very sketchy LinkedIn profile, it does in a way reflect back on the organization or any level of hiring manager. So it's not just if you are an active career seeker, it's part of the whole brand that you bring to the market, so it's important from that perspective. But then also if you are actively looking for something, if there's no information there, people are not going to know whether you can match where you need to go. The other thing where they make a very big mistake is then to either put in too many words, so it is just words, and the human eye is not able to actually follow all of that. So you can't work with pages and pages and pages and there's no white space in between. So that's very difficult to work. And so you might have all the keywords, but there's just way too much going on there. And then one of the biggest things, and that's where I find most people need to shift, is that when you are presenting yourself, and this goes both for CV as well as for your LinkedIn profile, is you need to have your stories and your key value adds and your key successes put together in a few key lines, so we're looking 3-4 lines, but give me numbers, give me quantifiable results, give me something that I can put a picture around it. Because if you give me a copy and paste of a company job description, it's generic. It tells me nothing. I don't know why you are amazing, because everyone else who carries your same title has got that same job spec, and they've got that same list of duties. So where the real amazingness comes in is when you're telling me, I've done this, I've contributed this, I've shifted that, I've been able to get involved in this. These are the projects I've worked on. And then you don't need to go and tell me, like about 90% of the other people, I'm an accomplished this. When you tell me your story, I can see you are accomplished, and that's where a lot of the mistakes are, that it's too generic, and they don't explain really where that value add is. And so that's something that I work a lot with. Oh, I find with probably 98% of the people that I work with in terms of helping them, is that you start being able to tell your story. And then when you can tell your story on LinkedIn, you can tell your story in that same way on your CV or your resume, which is again the same thing when it lands in front of a hiring manager and they can see what you've done, much more powerful than just a list of responsibilities. And it also trains you already when you are going to be going into an interview process, because competency-based interviewing or the behavioral style interviews are the most popular ones to use now. But it's the same thing. They're going to ask you, give us an example of. And unless you've got your stories prepared, it's so difficult when you get into an interview to suddenly remember, where did you do this? How did you handle conflict? Now you need to kind of, in a stressful situation already, rack your brain for a good example to use. And then you walk out and you think, oh, I should have used that example. That's so much stronger. So I really send them home with homework, and I tell them, go and sit down and write down all your examples, write down your stories, think of the amounts, think of the percentages, think of the quantifiable results, and be able to explain that to me, because that's where you pack the punch, and that's just a way more powerful way to go about approaching it. And it doesn't matter whether you are at the very top of your game or whether you are really still entering the job market. If you're a student, you can do the same thing. You can tell me where you got involved, how you did on projects, or, those kind of things, because it brings that human connection in, and this is what you are doing here, with the human connection. It's the stories. That's what people want, because they can connect to that and resonate with that. And that's a very different approach to just duties.
Wow, that's amazing the way you've put that together. And if you translate that into a CV, a typical CV layout, would you say that there is a more relevant way to lay out your CV than the typical boring sort of? Okay, so do you have templates for something like that as well? I see this infographic that people put together, and that's quite powerful in terms of the very specific, more succinct.
It can work sometimes, those, Carmen. What I find oftentimes with those, though, is, again, it's very vague and generic. And, you've got all these things and they look pretty and they look fancy. Even a lot of the template layouts would have 2 columns, for example. Now, if you're going to be sending it directly to a person, that's not a problem. But if you're, for example, going to be applying via job boards, many of them can't read the 2 columns. So, and even if you're sending it to a person and you've got 2 columns and, a whole page doesn't show on a computer screen in one go. So if someone sends me that and I now need to scroll down this side, then I need to come back up and I need to scroll down the other side. Sometimes just the pure frustration of trying to figure out what's going on, and there's info here and there's info there, and then there's little pictures here and a little diagram there, is not as powerful as literally just horizontally starting with an executive summary, where you kind of give 2 or 3 lines. This is your background in terms of qualification, years of experience, industry sector, and the type of role. And then you start packing that punch, key successes. And I prefer using something like key successes, for example, rather than saying accomplishments. It just sounds less arrogant to me, And so then I would go into key successes, and you choose maybe 3 or 4 of the big things that you've done. You put them right in there so that at first glance, someone can see it. Because when someone opens your CV, and that's going to be the same with your LinkedIn profile, you really have an absolute maximum of 30 seconds for them to see whether they're going to read further. So if you send them something that's very difficult to find the most important information, because generally on any role, there's going to be about 3 key things that must be answered, that you must maybe have certain industry experience, you must have a certain level of qualification, you must be in a certain area, something like that. So there's generally about 3 things. Once those are answered, then you will read further to see, okay, what's the depth and what is the context here? Now you can imagine if you get into a whole lot of generic words right there at the top of your executive summary, and it's just accomplished and, experienced and good at this and good at that, but there's nothing that I can measure it with, I kind of just fly over that, And then if you give me pages and pages and there's so many words and my eyes kind of just jump from the one to the next, but I still don't read properly, it doesn't do what you want it to do. And, I find that with people who give you these 25 pages CVs, and I think I don't want to leave anything out. The truth is no one reads even what you've put on there because it's too much. No one has the time to do that. So you want to pack a punch with those key things, and then you want to give them key successes that say, oh, wow, I should read further here. And then you get down into really just your work experience. So it would be the last 10 years is going to be the important part. If there's anything before that, you kind of just want to mention it. If anyone wants to know about this, they can ask, but you don't need to put it onto a CV. And then you're going to be month, date that you started, month, date that you ended in a role. You're going to give who the company is. You're going to give a quick overview. So you don't want to go and copy and paste off a company jobs site. You want to give them an idea of what department, what area, and what space you have worked in. So, for example, in mining, say you are a qualified engineer and you've worked in open cast mining with heavy mining equipment. I need to know that because you could have worked on fixed plant, or you could have worked in underground mining. It could look very different. So I just want that context that I can put a picture around it. And then you give me the most important things there, maybe 8 or 10 duties. But again, you give me that picture and you give me your key successes. And then you go that way. So that means you can really condense it down in anything from 2 to 4 pages. It's easy for the eye to read. You've got bullet points, you've got white space in between, so the eye can jump easily between the information. And there you go,
Okay. So tell us, there's this, when you think about recruitment, you think often there's a black hole, and when I hit this button, the send button, the CV is going to go into some flipping hole, and I don't know where it's going to come out, and I might not even hear about anything. I don't get feedback. How do you stand out? So you say you've done what you've said,
yes.
the experience, and you're the best. How do you get this recruiter to want your CV on top of the pile? Is there a way that people could just do something different to the typical CV thing?
Carmen, that is going to be a part of the whole way that people approach it. So when you then say you've got this optimized CV prepared and people can see it, then what we get a lot on this side, and I mean, if it happens to me as a headhunter and a recruiter, I can tell you it happens to hiring managers and it happens to internal recruitment teams even more so, where people would send a CV through and there's almost not even a signature on that email. They CC about 50 people in the same email. So in other words, they treat you so generic, there's no way you're going to pay attention to them. They assume that just because they bother to send a CV through, you need to take the time to open that CV and read it. Well, you don't really, and they don't give any context as to why it is relevant. So some of the big mistakes that people make in it is, number one, they would just send it through without doing their homework. So they'll send it through to, I get CVs of people who are working in industries that I've never worked in. I can't help someone in hospitality. It's got nothing to do with my space, so don't send it through to me. Then they send it through without a signature, or they don't put any context into that email to say just a few notes on what their background is and where they fit in, so that I even know if it's worth it to open it up, So if you go and approach it that way and you just flip it over, or you kind of ask to connect to someone on LinkedIn that's in the recruitment space, and the next thing they get from you is an email with a CV attached, but they haven't asked for it, you're actually shooting yourself in the foot, because you think you've done a lot of work to send your CV out, but no one is looking at it because there's no relevance to it. I need to know why it's relevant, why I need to actually open this and look at it. And that's the same on employer side as well, And, you see these LinkedIn posts more frequently now, but where people get quite despondent and they think, oh, I've send my CV out 1,000 times and no one has come back to me. It's because of those mistakes. It's because of the irrelevance, if I want to say, and no context. So there's no reason for people to actually look at you, So that's very important. So if you do want to stand out, you should take the time to customize it, to explain why, even for every position that you're going to be applying for, because there will be different focuses. So make sure you highlight that. Don't assume someone else is going to do that work for you. Don't be lazy about it. And then in this kind of market where you've got the kind of unemployment rate we are dealing with at the moment, it's just going to take time. So you have to be resilient about it. But the more you do your homework, the better you are going to be presented. And the better your chances are that people are going to look at it. And then, when you start building your network, for example, LinkedIn is very powerful with that nowadays. Make sure that when you do reach out to decision makers, that you show them the relevance. If you just flip across an invitation, well, they've got such busy lives. Why should they accept you? Where is the relevant? Where is the connection? So take the time to make the effort and make them understand this is a thought through process. I'm not building here just to add another connection. I'm building here to make relevant connections in my environment and to look at a long-term build, not just what you can do for me right now because I'm desperate for a job, but I'm actually building with a longer term view.
Very, very nice advice. Thank you. Can you remember, if you think about the last 20 years, has there ever been something that really stood out for you that someone did differently or creatively to get your attention that they the one? Has stood out for you besides a CV?
Yeah, there has been ones throughout the years. I mean, I know right now at the moment, and this one is just very fresh in my memory. I mean, there's so many other examples, and now it's exactly what I'm telling you. I didn't put down those examples because I didn't expect that question, But I mean, I'm thinking just now of a video that I did last week for people on just building your network with a view on the long term, and a guy that reached out to me recently, again, it's someone that I placed in my previous company, so it's more than 10 years back. And he sent me a connection request again, but you don't remember the names even after such a long time. And he sent me the connection request, but with that, he made the most beautiful note, and just to say thank you so much, because I placed him in that position. He's still with that company after, and he's just been able to grow his career throughout these years, and it's been such a rewarding thing for him over all these years. And that kind of a thing, it stands out. I mean, I had a young chappie once who was also just very recently qualified in the space that he was in, and I just helped him to get his CV proper and things like that, just really to help him. And a few days later, here's a big bunch of flowers arriving just to say thank you, So there's little things like that sometimes that's just, wow, it's so unexpected. But the thank you that comes back when you've just done something and, you don't do it for the thank you, you just do it to help people. But it's nice when they do that. It really is.
So what you're touching on here is this going the extra mile, so that you don't end up in a black hole. So get noticed, add that extra little bit of attention to detail, make it personal, create the context, help people make the connection as to why they need to actually take notice of you. And then, of course, all the other things are very relevant, and put in the right things. So almost what you're saying is tailor your connection with each person for what they're looking for and what it's important to them and the value you can add to them, because you may even need to shift things on your CV a little bit to put certain things higher up in terms of what's important. Okay, that's really keen, and I don't think a lot of people in the job market would go to that length to customize their outreach to each person. And that probably, yes, I can imagine how that would make a massive difference to you recruiters receiving so many CVs for a particular job. Let's talk a little bit about the other side of it, the hiring manager. So they also have quite a task on their hand. And I saw some stats on your website where you're saying 46% of new hires, it's actually a failure. So you recruit someone and 46% of the time it doesn't work out. Now, first of all, let's put that into perspective. What is the cost to a company when a hiring process goes wrong? Maybe let's put that out so that we can actually understand the importance of this hiring process.
Yeah. So the general statistics that are out there would put it at fairly junior levels at about 3 times the cost of someone's annual salary for a fairly junior person, because you can imagine when you make a mishire, there's the recruitment cost itself, whether you are paying an outside company to do that. So whether there's an actual recruitment fee or whether it's even your internal team doing that, being able to advertise the job, take it to the market, go through the whole interview process, all the costs involved with getting someone on board and that. Then there's the other cost, which is a little bit more difficult to quantify, but there's the cost of team morale. When you keep on losing one person after the other and one after the other doesn't work out, that's got a whole big effect. And every time everyone now needs to adjust to someone new, and instead of someone coming on board and adding value, here's another failure, and what they were supposed to contribute, they're not contributing. But apart from that, they're also taking away from the stability in the team and the momentum of the team being able to go forward and do certain things. And then oftentimes in that in-between period, you sit with the job not being filled, and it puts extra pressure on other people in the team. And that's really at the junior levels at about 3 times the cost. When it gets to the more senior levels, it gets up to at least 15 times annual salary. It is very, very expensive because of the impact of that. And you can imagine when you've got an executive on board who's not fitting in, who's not right for that organization, who's not doing what they're supposed to, everything down from there, and even crosswise, business that should be done can't get done because it just does not work. So it's extremely expensive to go through this the whole time, so that's where they put it for the costs.
Hannah, I want to get that clear. It's 15 times an annual salary on an executive level. That is
millions and millions and millions and millions. Yeah, it's staggering.
Climate right now, most companies can absolutely not afford that. So for the hiring managers, from that perspective, what is the most common reasons for these failures? What's happening in these processes that it's going wrong?
Carmen, the biggest thing would be the way that the whole recruitment process gets approached. So whether it is at junior level or whether it is at senior level, but potentially at senior level more so because of the impact that has across the organization. At the junior level, you generally it's easier to find more people and bring them back on board. So you still don't want that loss because you would rather develop people. But when you go about recruitment in the general contingency kind of approach. So in other words, you've got a role that you need filled, you send it out to 5 agencies. I mean, the worst I've worked on was 23 agencies on the same role.
Oh my word.
It's ridiculous. You cannot control the message that's being sent out to the candidates. You're looking for top candidates, but by the time the 4th agency calls them about the same job, they feel like that about your job. I'm just one of a bunch. And everyone is working on this, and I'm really nothing special here, so I'm going to treat them the same way. Half these candidates can't even remember who has talked to them about the role and through whom they've sent their CV there. The other thing is when you're working with that many agencies, there's no way they can take your message, really get behind who you are, sell your opportunity, and bring that to excite those real key people that would fit right with your role. And it doesn't afford them the time that it requires to go and really make the match, because now they've got even just 2 other agencies competing for time. So if they're not first in there to get a CV across to you without having properly qualified that candidate for your role, they're going to lose out on the placement. And once they have got 3 or 4 CVs across your desk, they can't afford to spend more time on it because they only have a very limited opportunity to make the placement because it's contingency like that. So if they don't place the role, they don't get a fee. So they can't spend too much time on your role because they need to go on to the next thing where they also just have a 1 in 5 or a 1 in 10 chance to place the role. So you can't do the match properly. They can't go into the market to really go and find those A players. And sometimes, especially now in this job market where a lot of people are in the market, not because of their own failures, but just because of the kind of market we are in, there are some very good people out on the market. But if you can't work with them through the whole process, you might still lose them, and how will you know whether they really are these A players that will be right for your organization? And I say A players with a bit of a qualifier to it because someone who is an A player or a top achiever in one organization is not necessarily in another organization. So that match needs to be made as well. Do they fit with the wiring of your department and your company and where you are going, because they might be excellent in one environment, but they might not fit with you and it doesn't work. So to do that depth of assessment and that depth of match, you can't do that when you are putting that many people in competition with one another, and it just becomes a time and a numbers game, and it's just whoever gets to it first puts that CV across. So that's one of the big things that employers do, where they shoot themselves in the foot, because you can't just compare that way. It takes a much deeper working. The other thing is also, you really need to, if you're doing this properly, you need to be able, as an outside recruiter, and even your inside recruiters who's going to be working on the role, need to be able to put your company DNA together. So if you go to market and you can't tell them who you are, what makes you exciting, why these guys that are the best of the best of the best would want to come and work for you, what's your vision, what can they buy into, what projects is coming up that really excites them, that they can just come and blow the lights out in your environment. If you don't give them that to latch onto, to say, this is why I want to come and work here, why should they come and work for you? You expect the candidate to sell themselves to you, but you should be selling the opportunity the whole time through. And if you partner there with someone who knows what they are doing in recruitment and can take your message to the market, and has built that reputation in the market, that when they do call someone, people actually pick up the phone and talk to them because they've got some reputation in the market, they've got some credibility in the market, you already have won a lot of where you want to go with who to bring on board. And many times hiring managers think, I'm too busy, I don't have the time to do this, just bring me a lot of CVs, we'll take the best of the bunch. Or at other times they think, well, when I see someone, I will know this is the right person, there will just be a synergy. And there is a part for gut feel, but the problem is we often put onto other people what we want them to be, and you're so desperate to get someone in who's going to work out, and so you're looking for those places where you can like them, but you haven't checked it out properly. So it's better to, even if that liking is there, to say, let's just dive a little bit deeper, let's get a second opinion, let's get someone more in, let's ask some more questions, let's do some more about it, and do a proper in-depth thing there, so that you can mitigate a lot of this risk before you get into making an offer. And if you give up on that thorough work and you replace it with quantity work instead of quality work, you are going to be paying the price every time.
Mm-hmm. And this is where you and your company is differentiating the recruitment space, because you've developed a 7-step top talent system to actually help companies de-risk this hiring process.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about this process and how it's helping companies de-risk this process. And given now that you've told us the costs involved, wow.
Yes. Yeah. So that would be exactly it. A lot of what we talked about now would really be that groundwork that gets done, and you can't go too quick about that. You need to have that properly in place. Now the advantage is obviously, with like some of the organizations that I've worked with for 10 years, and it's just been a relationship that worked, and obviously over the years you get to know them better and better and better, and you're able to manage that process. I'm thinking now with one of them, for example, because they can be very slow on their recruitment, you run a risk of losing these people because they kind of think, what's going on, and they lose interest. But because I know them, I can help to steer these candidates through it. Some of my worst has been, it took 9 months before the placement was made. In most cases, you would lose that candidate, and you would have no chance. But we could manage the process through and still get them who they wanted and who they needed, in spite of all kinds of other curve balls coming in between. So that whole first part, where you set up what the employer value proposition would be, what the company DNA is, what the story is that we're taking to market to make it attractive for these top players. So that would be very important in terms of the start. And then you would do your market map, who's in the market, who would qualify, who's got what we need for this role, because obviously not everyone can do the same role. And then you start going to market and you start taking the story, and you start talking to those who would be interested. You really work at bringing that in front of the right people. And that's why it's so important, as we are building the relationships in the market, and you build the credibility, and you've got access to people and they know you already. There's people that I can talk to now that I couldn't talk to in in year one in my own business in mining. I've got so many people that I know now, or who know about me, who can refer me to places. So it's just something that takes time to build that, and then you start assessing them and matching them next to it. And that's then where the company comes in, and then they do their own. So there's an interview process that we can help them put together. And it's everything from, obviously there would be a part where you're just really going to check, can they do the job? Do they know what they're talking about? But then there's also that part of, do they have the same DNA that this organization have? Do they have those qualities that work in this organization to make you a top achiever here, and you start assessing for that and asking questions around that. And if you've got the luxury of doing a working interview, sometimes that can be replaced with a presentation or something like that, but you actually see them deal with a specific problem pertinent or relevant to your environment, and although they might not do it 100% perfect because they're not inside the organization, it can give you a good idea of how they're going to perform there. And then once those things are in place, and of course throughout that, you keep on telling your story, why this is exciting. You never miss an opportunity to keep on reiterating that so that they stay excited about it. And then when you go through that the client interview process, and then of course, once you get to that stage where you're ready to make offers and that kind of thing, it's a very sensitive stage because they're in the market now. So once they've made that switch of thinking, okay, well, I can maybe shift jobs, they could be open to other opportunities as well. So you want to make sure that you keep a very tight process there. You keep on working closely with them. Your onboarding is done properly. So the entire candidate experience right through to offer, because it's not just the money, it's opportunity, and it's what they will become and what they're going to grow into. And then, of course, through that, once they are on board, to actually for at least 6 months to a year period, stay in touch with candidate and with client at regular intervals, make sure everything is going smooth. If there are things that need to be assessed, even in that, and that's kind of the longer term onboarding. Clients sometimes think, okay, well, now you're on board and a month later, we don't need to kind of look after you anymore. It's important for a long period to keep on having regular meetings with your manager. So if you bring top talent on board, schedule that in for weekly meetings, and after maybe 2 or 3 months, shifted to 2 weekly meetings, but stay in touch with them so that you can catch the things that's not working, rather than losing them 6 months down the line because either you did not do what they needed to know that they're going in the right direction, or it's just not clear for them what's going on here. So they're kind of like, okay, this is not working and I'm not contributing here, so I'll rather go somewhere where I can make a difference, So that's all the steps that we work through, that you make sure you don't drop the ball anywhere through the whole recruitment process.
That's incredible. Hanna, if I look at my own corporate journey and having been part in a number of different parts of the organization, as I work through my my 10-year corporate journey, and then I did actually end up in HR, and having worked with so many corporates over the years, I have never heard of a recruitment scenario as you have just mapped out. I mean, the level of detail, the relationship, the connection, the fit, the synergy, so what you're talking about is a completely tailored process where you are, it's almost like a mentor-mentee process you're talking about, where there has to be chemistry on so many levels. So, I mean, and what you're talking about is incredible. I can see why you're a most wanted recruiter. What you bring in is of so much value. And so there's more than just the fit between the company and the future employee. There is the fit between the company and the recruiter. So there needs to be this fit, which is what you're talking about, that potentially so many companies have not quite realized. Instead of getting all these 25 recruiters on board, have a handful and develop this deep relationship with them. And so do you have sort of sole mandates with the companies that you work with?
Yeah, the ones that I've developed this, this is the thing that, I mean, in many cases, and I mean, obviously it's got to do with my own growth and maturing as well, because you're not this who you are now versus what you were 10 years back is also a very different thing, so you keep on growing and refining and learning more. But the ones that I do work with like this, that's most of the time how we work. So we work very closely. And I must say, the further I go on, the more reluctant I am to work on anything where it's going to be the shotgun approach, because it doesn't work. It doesn't work for candidates. It doesn't work for companies. It doesn't get them the best people. And it doesn't work for me because I can't do the job properly. So these that I work with, it's that kind of a thing. So, your options there would be really exclusive contingency, which means it's still contingencies that they only pay you if you do place the role, but they only work with you on that, and they empower you as a recruiter to be able to go and do that job properly, because I can't do it unless they give me the information I need and the cooperation I need and the answers I need on that. The advantage is, of course, from a company perspective, if you've got someone that you can trust like that and partner with like that, you are going to get the absolute best out of it, because they have got 100% chance to fill this role. So if it takes them 6 months to find you what you need, they're going to keep at it until they've got that for you, unless you come up with unrealistic expectations. And it's so much easier for them to also give you the feedback in the market and show you where adjustment needs to be made because it can't be done. And then, of course, the other way that you could work with that, which is really a very good way of working, is on an engagement thing. So that's in between when you've got the retained options versus the contingency option. So the contingency option, you would only be paid once you make the placement, whereas on retained, you get paid in tranches, third, at different parts of the process. The engagement fee is almost like a deposit that they put down, so there is a portion of money that passes hands right from the beginning that engages your recruiter to actually take the time off, spend the time, give the dedication that's required. It gets their buy-in, your commitment to the process, and all parties are kind of on the same space, and it secures that exclusivity. And then from there, the balance of it is only when they do place. So for you, it's less costly than, for example, a pure retained process, but you still get that same value. But the full money only changes hands once there has been a successful placement on that. And so, yes, that's the way that I work, is in that way, because you've got that trust relationship. So whether it be from exclusive contingency to engage to retain, but in all cases that you have that trust in how you work together.
What I like about what you're saying, Hanna, you may be speaking very specifically about recruitment, but what you've done in your business and the relationships that you've built with clients who have now become very long-term clients is exactly the same in any business. To add Absolutely. That value, to find a way to create the depth. So what you're talking about, you've gone deep. You've gone deep in craft. You've gone deep into building the relationships and getting to understand your clients. You go deep into understanding the candidates and bringing all of this together in such an art. It's art and a science that you've created. And for us to succeed in any business, in any job role, anywhere in life and in business, this is what it requires today. Maybe years ago we could get away with being, a little bit shallow. But today we require the depth. We need the relationships are more, maybe even as crucial as the technical knowledge. Yes. The model that you've also created. So you don't just have a sort of a loose process. You've created a model that you can then take to new companies and where you can show the value and then the stats that comes through that. I just wanted to make those parallels for people who may not be in recruitment, but in their own businesses and showing, the value that you've brought is the same value other people can bring through what they do and stand out completely, because it actually just takes that extra mile, going those deeper steps, which is what you've done. Thank you for sharing all of that with us. You talk about working in your gift. Tell me about that.
Yeah. So, I'm so, my mind is so in considering that at the moment from so many different perspectives, but, it's very important that I think a lot of the reason why people misfit in what they are working and why people get very frustrated in what they are doing is because they're not working in their gift. They have gone and qualified in a certain area because they thought they could make more money in that area, or parents pushed them in that area, and it was kind of a good thing to fall back on, but they're not passionate about what they're doing. So then it really becomes very tedious to work on something. It really becomes only responsibility. Whereas if you get excited about what you are doing and you love what you are doing, even though there is hard work to be done, it's much easier to keep at it and to keep doing it, And I think that's something that's important to consider for people. Are you really working in where your gift is, and what you have really been, your natural capabilities, and those things that really fire you up, and sometimes it could be applied in many different ways, So for example, for me, the people side, I so enjoy working with the people, but I could do that in fashion, and I could serve them in a certain way there, and I can do it in recruitment, I can serve them in a certain way there. So it's a little bit more generic. For others, for example, if they go in a specific area of engineering, they might be just so passionate about mining, and they work in that space. But that's ideal, that you actually find that space where it becomes about really your gifting and being able to flow in that, because then you will excel in it. If you put the work behind it, sure, you are going to need to put the work behind it. But if it is that space that really you are wired for, that doing that thing, you will excel in it. And it's almost going to be natural to excel in it, because you can't help yourself at being good at it, and you will just find it so much more fulfilling and rewarding. So it's, worth considering carefully.
Wow. And again, in this space that we find ourselves in, where people are making so many changes, maybe right now that's crucial. Instead of just going to find another job like you had before, take the time maybe to find out what is that gift, because they'll probably will open up, and there'll be that flow that you're talking about.
Yes.
That find your gift. That's really it just encapsulates it so beautifully. You work a lot with your senior level executive, your senior leaders, and you've spoken about a triangle and inverted triangle when it comes to leadership. Tell us what you mean by that.
Okay. Yeah. So, when the majority, I don't know if it's somewhat shifted, but really a lot of people focus very much on what they are eventually going to be doing. And they're so focused on the final outcome and the result of where they're going to. So say, for example, it's someone that's very ambitious and their goal is to become a CEO of a large organization. Everything in their life plays second fiddle, and the whole focus just goes on that. And while they are working very hard to that, they're only developing one side of themselves. But the problem is that gets you to an inverted triangle, because if you think of your triangle having 3 layers, so you've got your personal leadership at the bottom, you've got your next level, which is your public leadership, and that would generally be you in the workspace and where you're starting to lead people and that kind of thing. And then you've got that final part where you are really getting to your purpose leadership. And this is the thing where you're really making a difference in the world. You're the president of the country, or the CFO, the CEO, the whatever your position is. And it doesn't have to be that high. It could be whatever it is for you. But that's kind of that where you really work in your purpose, what you're supposed to do in the earth. Now, you can imagine if you've got this as an inverted triangle and you spent very little time on developing your personal leadership, relationships, health, all those kind of things that would your physical strength, your even things like sleeping, and personal values and things like that, and everything just goes up towards your public and towards your purpose leadership. And your purpose is very big, so everything is about this big title that you're carrying and this big responsibility. This thing has to topple somewhere. Marriages go out the wall, kids go off the rails, you don't have relationship with them, families are out, and then eventually you get to that purpose leadership and you're now in your 50s or 60s or 40s, and you look back and you think, I've got nothing left but this title that I carried. It must topple. It can't. And many times it is. Then you end up being sick because you haven't looked after yourself in terms of health and things like that. And all your effort has just gone into this big purpose and the public side. Whereas if you have this triangle the right way, that you start with developing your personal leadership, everything from integrity, making the difficult choices, to develop yourself as a person, being just a decent person, doing things the right way, taking the effort, take the time that it takes to keep on developing family relationships, looking after your health, so that it's not just about chasing the money and chasing the big position. And that will automatically, when you've got that personal leadership in place, it will catapult you into public leadership, because the mastery that you have over your own life must put you into a place where others are looking at you and starting to follow your example. And that will eventually then put you into that purpose leadership, where you are really in that sweet spot, where you are contributing in your gifting, what you're supposed to do, doing the maximum, which affects many others positively, but everything else is also still in balance, and it stands on a strong footing. So you're not just a person with a title and a lot of money, but you're actually very poor in every other area of your life, So to put those different goals in place right from the beginning and work at developing all those parts, that will get you, it's much better from there to then naturally be pushed up into the other levels than, just pushing for that top level. You can have it, but there's a big cost to that.
Sure. Really lovely in the way in which you've represented that, Hanna. And so much of my coaching with senior executives, maybe in their later years, I have found exactly that, where they now need someone to support them because the triangle has toppled over. Yeah. And they realize, well, it's not too late, but it is late down the line, and something needs to happen, and we need to start from those foundations again. Beautiful way in which you've represented that. Thank you very much. And it to be a good leader starts with you inside. It starts with our personal stuff, and we're not always taught that. We stumble upon it somewhere later in life when it
yeah.
Tell me what happens in your mining's most wanted group. That's
okay, yeah, so that's fairly new. It's something I started in the course of this year. So it's very much still in development. And really it is just a place that's being developed. These things generally on LinkedIn, the groups take a long time to develop, so initially we really are just putting people together, bringing people together. The LinkedIn groups are quite well known for that there's not that much activity in it, but it is a place of connection where you've got senior leaders together. And it really is, that's the thought of it, that there is a platform for people in a controlled space, so it's not just general information out there, where you can link up with people and where you can bring specific things, whether it's opinions, whether it's thoughts, whether it's questions, and just really interact with leaders who are in your same industry and have some exposure and connection and build networks in that space. The truth of these things are, of course, with a lot of senior people, they consume information, but they're not so quick to actually comment on it. You will find a lot of the likes and the comments, and that is oftentimes more junior people, and obviously with your senior leaders, they kind of have less time to just spend time on that. So they might go in on the weekends and that. So it's a slower build, and it's the same thing as a lot of the rest we've talked about. It's a deeper build and it takes time, but there comes a time when these kind of things are necessary, and then people can leverage off that network that they're part of to interact on whatever it is really that's industry focused. And just because of the nature of the work that I do, that group also is discipline independent. So you will have mining finance people, you will have engineering people, and you will have people who are in the HR and OD type of space, and just every single space, but that are at a certain level of seniority, so that there is that exclusivity, and there, it's not just going to go out everywhere with anyone talking about it. So you've got that protected environment in which to bring things, talk about things, deal with things, propose things, that's relevant to the mining space.
And it's mining and recruitment in particular.
No, not at all. So the focus of the group, it's not at all. It's not a place, and that's a commitment that I've made to them all up front. I'm not creating this group to sell my services, and it's not a place for anyone else to come and sell their product. Okay. This is a place to build network and to build relationship, and to maybe be in some form of connection with people in other mining companies that you would not necessarily connect with in the same way, but in a trusted space, in a protected space. space. So, if ever I place and I do things on there that would be related, it would be more in terms of information that could help them as hiring leaders into how to approach hiring, but it's not to sell my services as a headhunter or a recruiter at all. That's not the focus. The focus is really information to grow and help them in the space. And that would be the same for them if they bring things on board. It's not to sell their product or sell their company or come and recruit someone off there. It really is about things that would be relevant that people in the industry are dealing with.
And again, Hanna, true to form and what you stand for, you've created a resource that's just adding massive value to the sector that you serve, which it has a reciprocal value to it. So you put that value out there, and the connections and the relationships, people get to know who you are and what you stand for, and it comes back to you anyway. There's one last thing that I would love to touch on. You, at some point, you were an employee too, and you made transition into being an entrepreneur. And just as we have a lot of people entering the job market right now who didn't think they needed to be in the job market, we've also got the other side of it where people are maybe feeling, whoa, they not able to enter the job market, and maybe entrepreneurship is a better angle for them. If you could go back to that transition that you made, what advice would you give to people right now making this transition from being an employee to being an entrepreneur? What's some of the key things that they can do to make that transition a little bit smoother from your own experience?
Yeah, so I think, again, Carmen, it comes back to what we've talked about, also working in your gifting, and there's something that I've actually observed really from earlier on years in recruitment already. As soon as I started working with more senior people, I found that a lot of the people at some stage in their career come to a point where they think they want to go and try their hand at their own business. And then a lot of these senior leaders come back within a year or 2 years, and they're very frustrated with it because you were used to working in a large corporate environment where you've got all of the systems, you've got all of the support, you've got all of the people. And now suddenly it gets down to really, very basic things. You need to sort out your own IT, and you need to, very simple, mundane things that other people would do for you, So not everyone is an entrepreneur by heart. And I think that is where a lot of people make the mistake that they kind of feel, I must go that way, or that's the only option. So I think it's important that you first understand that it will look very, very different to what it's been like. And in those cases, it probably would be better for you to rather try your hand at consulting back into large firms than necessarily trying to build your own business up, because it looks so different. I mean, for me, I've always worked, even in recruitment is always an entrepreneurial space just by nature of what it is, so even if you are part of a larger organization, and yes, there is a difference when you start doing it for yourself versus when you are working in an organization with some other recruiters, and there is some implications, but at the end of the day, you're still very much used to needing to do that business, and go after it and be excellent in your own way, So, if you, for example, a qualified CA and you work at a CFO level, and now all of a sudden you need to come down to doing the most basic things, well, you're actually going to probably find more enjoyment in consulting back to a large organization than necessarily now starting a little organization and doing books of people who earn just a little bit of money, because it's not your space. You're used to doing annual financial statements for listed companies, and now you're coming to do personal tax. It's just not the same space. So I think it's important that people assess themselves in that first and understand what it's going to be like, and is that really where they want to go. And I'm not saying the one is right or not. You just need to know what you are in for, if that is what you want to do, and then see how you position from there. And I think then the other thing is what you do need to know. And I mean, I hear that across the board from people who come back into the corporate environment, who tried their hand at doing their own thing and it didn't work for them, is that you need to be ready for that. It's going to look very different. It's going to take longer than you expect to get things off the ground and run with it. It's just not an overnight thing. You are going to sit down probably a few times crying and thinking, oh, did I make the right choice? This is so tough. I don't know how I'm going to do this. You must be willing to, you must have a financial buffer if you can, to carry you through not just a few months, but generally a few years, So there's some things like that you need to assess very carefully before you just make the jump. And then also know that if it doesn't work out, because, sometimes you just need to try your hand at something to know this is not me, and it actually strengthens you in what you should be. But if you've done that, also that when you want to come back into the corporate environment, it might also take you a little bit longer than you expected, So I think that's probably one of the biggest things. Just know that it generally will take much longer and much more effort than you expected. If it's really what you want to do and where you should be, and even in key points in between, you reassess and you realize, no, this is still where I should be, well, then just, stick it out and be tough with it. But yeah, I think that giving yourself the gift of allowing you to fail and allowing it to be more difficult than you expected and allowing it to take longer, even just that, going in with that mindset helps,
Fantastic. Thank you, Hanna. Come from someone who's been there, been in the trenches, things out the hard way, as we all do as entrepreneurs when we make the especially when you a wonderful salary paycheck every month, and then that first in your own office.
Yes.
But maybe that paycheck doesn't come along. So being mindful again and being deep and bringing it back to that gift. I love the idea of the consulting, which is more of a soft landing than setting everything up from scratch. Thank you for that. If you had a magic wand, Hanna, what would you love to make happen in your industry?
Oh, sure, Carmen. I think at the moment for me, the biggest thing was just that everything picks up. And, there's so many amazing people at the moment who, through no fault of their own, are in very precarious positions, risking to lose their jobs, or, it's not. So that's one of the things that just, there would be opportunity again for people to come on board and to grow and to keep on learning. So that definitely is, I think for me, just from where I am, that those opportunities are there for growth, and more people to come back in and be able to work in what they can do really well. I think that would be the outstanding thing for me, just because of what I do,
Wouldn't that be wonderful if that magic wand could land in your hand? And one final then question is, if you could have the opportunity to speak to all 7 billion people on this planet, what would you love to share?
That we are building generationally, and the way that you speak and the attitudes that you hold are affecting those around you. And so for example, sometimes you would find parents and they're very critical of all kinds of leadership. So what they're training their kids in is that you should not honor leaders. But without leaders, there can't be followers, and followers don't know where they are going without leaders. We always need leaders. So if you instill through your speech and your own frustrations in other generations or people around you in the workplace, it's not just even children, but I mean, children and parents are a good example, but it's anyone around you where your voice has got an influence or people hear you speak. What you put into them, if it's always bitterness and anger and frustration or criticism, you're not helping them along in life, because that's the attitudes that they then start picking up, and that's how they approach things. So when they come to a place where they actually need people who know something more, who can help them transition into the next step, now they've got this whole mindset of leaders are horrible and we don't like them and people are always against you. I don't want to build that way, because we're building for generations. So if we can rather build with things like being quick to forgive, being grateful, having a generosity in spirit, really, in how we approach life and people, not teaching people to be so competitive that it's always about who's best and who's second best, but really that everything is an opportunity to learn and to grow, and we just keep on learning and growing. If we're aware of what our words do to others and what attitudes it instill in them, we can really build generationally so much stronger, and that's something that I would love to see, that instead of us breaking down, we rather build up. That doesn't mean people are perfect, leaders are perfect, no one ever is, but no follower is perfect either. We all have our stuff, but if we can come to do it together and work together for better outcomes, my goodness, we can go much further, much quicker.
Wow, thank you so much. And thank you for, I can't believe an hour has gone by so quickly. Thank you for the wonderful role model you are as a woman, as an entrepreneur, as a leader, as an expert in your industry, as a value contributor. Thank you so much, Hanna, and for sharing your insights. I feel like I've been sitting at a well, dipping my basket into, or my bucket into this well, and really getting all this amazing nourishment, because you come from a place of knowing, and such incredible, practical, relevant insights you've shared with us today. And thank you, because that's given us such a wonderful knowing in terms of what mistakes we need to avoid and how to stand out from the crowd. So I can really see why you are a most wanted recruiter. And now we all know become more wanted in this overcrowded workplace.
Yeah.
Business world. Thank you. Thank you for your today and sharing so abundantly with us.
You're welcome. Thank you. It's a privilege to have been able to do this. Thank you.
Thank you, Hanna. So I believe that we're in a global reset phase, a phase of reinvention. Whether you're in the employer of a company or whether you the CEO or the company founder, it's crucial right now to redefine how you do business. And we have the opportunity to redefine how we do business so that we go into the future not only succeeding, but thriving. And creating an opportunity where we can be our best and work in our gift in this new normal that is unfolding around us. And the best way that we can do this is to overcome the myriad barriers and challenges that we're facing right now, is to bring humanity back to business, to connect deeper with ourselves, to connect deeper with each other, to collaborate rather than compete, and to co-create solutions for our future and create that future that we're going to be proud of. And I believe truly that if we were to do this, we will celebrate successes, and we absolutely together will write a new and enriching human story.